Bootstrapping is how many newly minted founders launch their startup using their own savings and borrowing capability and money from that they get off of friends and family to get the business off the ground. And a lack of funding can cause a founder to freeze, to get caught in a mindset chokehold that prevents them from moving forward, from seeing solutions. So, how do you get unstuck? Our guest is the queen of dissolving mindset blocks that keep folks from achieving their dreams. And she has outstanding advice and pathways to help you bootstrap your business to achieve traction and increase valuation. And founders, you know that when you can increase valuation through bootstrapping, investors are going to be much more interested in your deal, and you'll keep a much higher percentage of the equity in your business. What's not to love about that, right? Get ready to raise your game, founders, with this episode of the Startup Life Live Show. Let's glow, everyone. Hello and welcome to the Startup Life Show. I'm your host, Ande, Lyons, 4 times founder and startup champion to founders around the world. And after raising 4 businesses of my own, I got a really good idea of what you are showing up for every single day, digging deep, figuring out all sorts of solutions to the big, hairy problems that you're facing. And here's the clapper for you. I am cheering wildly for you because I know you've got this. I am grateful that you carved out time to tune in to the Startup Live Show to up your founder game, because as you do better, that's right, your startup is going to do better. And that's what we have to do. There's something that prepares you when you hop into the seat, right, of founderhood. It's like figuring things out constantly and on the fly. So I know you're going to grab some gems from this delicious conversation today. A big yoo-hoo and mwah to the video viewers and podcast listeners. I'm so grateful for your time here. And to the podcast listeners, if you could just do a subscribe, a like, a rating, a comment, oh my gosh, that really helps us reach more folks. And if you're tuning in from YouTube, please click on that subscribe button and be sure to like the video. Again, it increases our reach and helps us help more founders around the world. And if you'd like to get a deep dive and an alert whenever I have uploaded a new show, both for the podcast and on the YouTube channel, be sure to join the Startup Life Meetup group. Okay, the links are right there. There's a QR code there for you. And that way you're going to get all the scoop on a founder that you're like, oh my gosh, they're in the same industry. There's something there, information that founder is going to be talking about. And if you are a B2B business, woman-owned here in the U.S., and you haven't gotten WeBank certified, you are leaving money on the table. There are government and corporate contracts out there waiting for you. But a lot of times, and if you've been onto the website, you start to fill out that application and you go, oh, hell no, because you don't know what you don't know. And it's just a really hairy application. Reach out to me, Ande at andelyons.com. I have helped dozens of female founders finish this application, get WeBank certified, whether they have just started out and they have no revenue yet, or they're at 80 million in revenue, and everywhere in between. I have helped many female founders. So feel free to reach out for me and we'll have a quick convo on how I help get that application filled out for you. Okay, so I'm so excited to introduce you to our extraordinary guest today. We're going to have such a delicious conversation with Tiana Sanchez. She's the CEO and founder of TSI LLC, a leadership and development company helping organizations train and develop a more competent, confident, caring, and collaborative workforce. Tiana is also a #1 best-selling author, executive coach, corporate trainer, keynote speaker, and host of Like a Real Boss podcast. Tiana's public and private sector corporate training and development client list includes Sony Pictures, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and California State University, Long Beach. She's also the author of 2 books. Like, she hasn't done enough already, right? Has written 2 books, Undefeatable, which we're going to talk about, and Effed Up, The Upside of Failure. And she's well known for her engaging high-energy keynote presentations at leadership conferences, women's conferences, higher ed events, and company retreats. Let's bring her into the room right here. Oh my gosh, Tiana, I am so
Hello.
happy. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That was so exciting. This is, I have to say, one of the more energizing interviews. I could tell we're going to have a juicy conversation.
Oh, absolutely. When I learned about your work in the world, Tiana, I went crazy because so often founders can be their own worst enemies, right? And the fact that you have figured this out and you are helping so many people get unstuck from their mindset chokeholds, that really is the hill so many founders die on, is their mindset. So I'm so excited to mine all of your tips today, as well as for bootstrapping, because that's all about leveraging resources until you get traction. Where are you hailing from?
I am in sunny California, Southern California. So, it's
Yay.
usually 72 degrees and sunny. I think we're actually a little warmer than that today. So don't get jealous.
I won't.
It's
I
just a
won't.
Cali day. It's just a regular Cali day.
I lived in Pacific Palisades for a couple of years when we had our .com business. And I got to tell you, every day I felt responsible for getting out. I mean, I felt there was a commitment because, being from New England where the weather was just, you did anything, it doesn't matter the weather. I felt, oh my God, I got to get out there. It's so beautiful.
It is.
Oh, there you were minding your business, doing whatever, and you were called to become an entrepreneur. Please share with folks your origin story, your launch story, because a lot of times I find out that founders were hustling product in third grade, or maybe they had parents that were entrepreneurs, or they just said, no one's solving this problem, I'm going to solve it. So, what is your story, Tiana?
And those are fantastic stories. That is not my story, which it would be great to say I had a brilliant solution to a problem that, where I grew up, in Los Angeles, California as a young child. It would be great to say that I stumbled across an invention and it just, kind of one thing led to another. But my origin story comes on the heels of tears. And the tears were I was laid off. So when we both, I think, shared working in the financial industry, I think I saw that as part of your background.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yes, so I worked for about 7 years in the financial industry. And when that financial crisis hit, things flipped. And our focus on lending on home loans changed from that to auto loans. Like the whole product service that we were pushing changed like overnight. And so did the culture within the organization. And so I had a pretty prominent position in the company. I was a regional manager. I oversaw one of our largest branches, and we started shifting. And I remember being called into the office one day, and three of my superiors were sitting on the other end, and I didn't know, but I was going to have these words with, we're letting you go. And I'd never been
Oh,
laid off ever. I started working at 16 years old, and I had never been laid off, fired at all from a job.
wow.
So on hearing that, I got up, packed up my stuff, headed home, and started automatically like the next day thinking about what that next step was going to be. And it was probably, Andy, 90 days after that event that I started what is now known as TSI LLC. But it didn't
Okay.
happen overnight. It
Of
was,
course
yes.
not. But these are the wonderful random moments where the divine God, whatever you believe in, can come through and say, this is great. I know you're happy and you're loving this payroll and you're doing and you're performing and meeting all your goals and achievements, but we need you over here now.
Yes, it definitely was a divine intervention for sure, because the environment was getting a little toxic, and it was like, okay, well, you probably need to move on from this particular chapter in your life.
But you might have, though, if you had been self-propelled, like, okay, I can't take this toxic environment another day, you might have just gone skippity doo over to someone else and continued. But when you get laid off like that so harshly, and having never been a member of I've Been Fired Club, wow, it disrupts your world. And I just love that 90 days later you were thinking about how I could serve the world versus I'm a loser and never get out
Right.
of bed. And so you must have used a mindset hack right away, even though, of course, it took years for you to build your business. And I'm sure it's evolved in many different ways over the years, but you had to use something in that 90-day period where you felt enough value and worthiness, where you said, okay, I've got something to give people and I'm going to do it because I don't ever want to be laid off and have that experience again. So I better be my own boss.
Yes. I think growing up in Los Angeles, California, being the middle child of parents, having my parents divorced when I was 12, you start to fend for yourself and you start to always think, not holding on to certain things because you never know when the world can change around you. And so being very independent and responsible at such a young age probably contributed to that swift turnaround. I always say that I was at the intersection of excitement and uncertainty because it was exciting starting a new chapter, a new business, but I was uncertain because I had never been there before.
Right.
And I think that was a big part of it. And for any of your founders who are looking to start, for me, the first place I went to was, what did I do well? What was a natural thing that I did in my 17 plus years having worked in as a manager? So even when I was in the financial industry prior to that, I worked in a management role, but I was developing people, I was coaching people, I was hiring people, I was training. And so I went back to my roots to figure out, what's my talent stack? What is it that I do really well? And that's a great place to start if you're a brand new founder or you're looking to enter into that space.
Wow. And I got to tell you, I was taking notes, everybody. What's my talent stack? Oh, it's almost like a stitch that on a pillow moment. It's so good because you have to constantly, as your talent gets greater, you have even more to give to the world. But to start off with, what's my talent? Even if when you're building a tech company, climate tech, whatever that is, you don't want to get stuck in doing it all. You still, even then, you have to start off with what is my talent stack. And so you knew coaching, leadership, developing people, helping them step more fully into their full expression in whatever lane that they're in was a talent that you had. Why was this a North Star for you? It could have been a crutch, like, well, I do this really well. And we know many people, and I'm sure you've coached many people who do lots of things really well, but they're not happy, right? So what lit this up for you where you jumped out of bed and said, yes, this is what I want to do?
I recall being in the work environment. I had two great experiences, Andy. I worked once for a company, Hot Dog on a Stick. We may get to touch on that later. If you're not from California or you've never heard of Hot Dog on a Stick, just think hot corn dogs and lemonade. Very simple menu. But I worked there for almost 8 years in a company where 90% of the people around me were women. And so my boss was a woman. So I had this incredible experience of collaboration and people that were just completely supporting you. And then I left that place and went into corporate world where things were a little dysfunctional at times. You had people that were, wanting to climb the ladder and climb over you to get up that ladder. And the environments that I've been in were all great. And so when it came time for me to figure out 90 days later what I wanted to do, it naturally was, I need to go back and help the people in the organization. And I was a manager. And so being a manager, that mid-level role, you're not quite the CEO, you're no longer the frontline staff, but you're in that sweet spot. Those were the people that I found were struggling the most, trying to navigate this. I'm not quite up here, but I'm not down here anymore. I'm operating in this space. And they were really struggling. And I remembered struggling. And I said,
Yes.
that's the lane. That is truly the people that I want to help and I want to support.
Ah, and there you are, folks. That is the niche that Tiana was able to slip right into, that lit her heart up so that she could have this as her North Star, where she could really serve the world with her talent stack, my new favorite word, and be able to provide value and get paid for this value. And that's so important. And what I really love too is that you had a lived experience, because this is how we grow, is these lived experiences, everyone. So important. At Hot Dog and a Stick, where 90% were female. The leaders were female. What great role models for you to see so that you can say, oh, the old, if I see it, I can be it, right?
Absolutely. It wasn't until I left that environment that I knew that it was an anomaly because I got hired and my boss was a female. My boss's boss, the CEO of the company, was a female. And I was surrounded in this environment where people looked like me, even the shade of my skin color, and my gender. I could see people that were like me. So there was no, I couldn't see it, so I couldn't be it attitude. I knew that I could be it. And it wasn't until I left that I was like, well, what are they doing over there? And what's happening over here? And it just wasn't the same. And then I
No.
was like, oh, I had a unique experience that maybe some really never got to experience. And the good news, Andy, I had it early in my career. So it was the norm. It was not the exception. It was the norm for
It was
me.
all you knew.
It was all I knew. Everything else was the exception.
Right. Oh, beautiful, because that leaves an imprint when you can see it that young. And then that's what, that particular part of your brain is starting to look for. You're like, well, why isn't everybody, as many people as possible look like me in this circumstances? So when you launched your business, TSI, you had to do what every founder does. It doesn't matter if it's a food product, a health tech platform, whatever it is, folks, you're going to get challenged in ways you've never even thought of. And I know you know what I mean when I say that. And one of my favorite saying is, you always win when you launch a business, no matter what happens, because it is the best personal development program out there. Let's talk a little bit about some of your blockers that are very typical for founders to run into when they're thinking of starting a company. They might be side hustling while they're staying at a gig, or they might be, fully on board, making it happen. There are things like you experienced, layoffs, savings, right? Family, children, and sometimes we don't feel like we have the education credentials. Please talk about that.
Well, you hit on the blockers. There's the external blockers, and then there's the internal blockers. A
Yeah.
lot of the external blockers, if you're a founder, one of the things that you're absolutely going to come up against, or you're going to think about, is your competition. It's going to be like, who has this idea already? It's really hard to create something new. So you have to think of, well, it may not be new, but it's going to be better. It may not be new, but it's going to be different. And so going into the training and development world, or even coaching, those are highly saturated industries. And so you think of, the Stephen Coveys of the world, the Dale Carnegies, the Ken Blanchards, the John Maxwells, great training companies, American Management Association. I mean, the list can go on. And so these are heavy hitters. So I had to figure out, how could I enter this space by doing something, again, not new, but better and different. And I had to figure out what kind of target audience I wanted. Was I going to get a really big chunk of the pie, or did I want a small slice? And so I started to identify the types of organizations I wanted to go after with the services that I was providing, the number of employees they would serve, even their asset size that I was pursuing, and the number one contact in the organization that I would be going after. And I was able to identify all of that and then make my case, pitch my services, if you will. But it takes that, number one, looking at the competition. So that's one of the external blockers.
Well, let me just have an Andy-licious moment here for a second. Oh my gosh, folks, Tiana is singing my song here. Sure, it's been done before, but not by you and not for us. Do not ever forget that when you are differentiating yourself from the competition, and that external block that Tiana just spoke about can really take you down. You've got to understand you are uniquely bringing. I mean, Tiana, I don't know if you've seen this in your grocery stores, but there's a whole new bread line called Dave's Killer Bread.
Yes.
Now, Dave Killer Bread, he's a formerly incarcerated man, and he hires a lot of formerly incarcerated people. Who in the world thought there was going to be room for another brand in the bread aisle?
No one, right? But he's doing something different. He has an origin story that's captivating. Yeah. He's like doing it different, maybe not new, but better.
Right. And I want to remind folks too, the other thing that you did that was so important was, and podcast listeners, I'm putting this up on the screen, the customer persona exercise. When you get into really, what do they look like? What are their motivations, goals, behaviors, expectations, all those things, coupled with what you said, Tiana, which was so important. What is the niche that I want? What is that slice that I want of the pie that I feel really comfortable with, that I can get as a good launch pad? And then understanding what the external blocks were. So what were some of the internal blocks?
Well, when I was laid off, right? So 90 days later, I'm starting the business. I have no formal degree, no formal education other than the hard knocks, right? Just whatever I grew up with. I did go to school, but no official degree, no business experience. I never owned a company before, nor did I have a template or a model of someone who owned a business that I recognized at that time. I would later find an inspiration in my own family, but it didn't happen initially. So I'm going through this am I qualified stage. Again, ambition, right? So I was at the intersection of uncertainty and excitement. So I was excited about the possibility, but uncertain because I didn't have the degree, didn't have the experience, no template, no money, no relationships really in that space. And so I'm starting to doubt and be concerned, is this something that I can actually do? And so when we talk about these blockers, you're identifying all of the things that you feel like you don't have.
Yeah.
But then you couple that with what I call builders, and then you list all the things that you do have. And those are the things that we tend to overlook. Maybe you may not have a degree, but you have knowledge in a particular area that again separates you from someone else.
Right.
You have maybe you may have a large network, but you know one or two key people, and it's quality, not quantity. So you begin to combat the negative, internal blockers with some of these builders that you already have that you didn't even realize.
Oh my gosh, it's like mitigating risks. You start figuring out what comes naturally to you. And this is after interviewing so many founders. Plus, I co hosted a monthly startup pitch event here in Boston for 3 years, Tiana. And so I've seen this so often with founders. The number one common ingredient, the number one thread that you all have is you've never met a problem you didn't love solving, just having that deep love of finding a solution and just going, and that great feeling when you have that. It's the same thing when you're doing that self-review that Tiana's talking about. When you start looking at yourself going, well, I tend to whatever that is, and you find out and you listed it. And I'm thinking, Tiana, you're the pro here, that when you go to start listing them, you find yourself maybe sitting up a little straighter and going, okay, all right, they may have this, but I got this. And that self-exploration with someone's help who can hold up a mirror, I imagine that's very important. Yes.
Yes, it's good to assess yourself individually, but you can also get other perspectives and be able to ask someone, what are some of your strengths? What do you see again as my talent? And, asking for that objective feedback, because we tend to be really hard on ourselves, but you may have a skill set or something that you didn't even recognize that is really good. Early on, people used to always tell me, oh, you sound like you could be, a newscaster, or you have that voice. And I never really thought too much about it, but it sure did come in handy when I started to train in person and I started to present, and then having a show and all of these things. And it actually warms up the room. People receive it really well. Who knew that my voice and speaking would be a talent, part of my talent stack? My mom just thought I was a talkative child, but it turned out to be a great skill set. So even though, and that came from feedback from
Yes.
other people external, I would have probably never identified that in myself. So invite others to contribute and ask for some of that objective feedback.
But what if you're shy and you're afraid to ask somebody that? Because, a lot of times we're told not to put the spotlight on ourselves, or, what is it that you think as a talent for me? How do you see me in the world so I can get a better understanding on how I could serve the world? How do you tell people to do that?
You can ask verbally or you can write it. One of the ways I might approach it might say, I am really working on developing myself, and I'm in a place of my career in a season where I want to strengthen the parts of me that are really good, and I want to improve the areas where I'm not so good. So I'd really appreciate some input and feedback. So here's a couple of questions I'd love for you to answer. And I appreciate your candor. Always make it very short. So it could be, no more than 3 questions, but be very specific on what you're asking, whether it's a rating scale, like on a scale of 1 to 5, what would you say? Or I feel like I'm really good at this. Is this something you would agree? Or I'm really looking to enter into this space, and I know these skills are required. Would you say that these are some of the skill sets that I possess? You can frame it a lot of different ways,
I
and again, you
love
don't have
that
to
advice.
verbally speak it, but you can write it down and you can send it out. Yep. So
use your Google Forms, folks. Send out 3 questions. They can be anonymous. They don't have to, it's wonderful in that way. And you're gathering, and you're going to go, oh, I didn't know about that. As Tiana, you said, I didn't know about my voice, but let me tell you, you overcame what I would think would be a huge blocker, which is the fear of public speaking, the fear of just getting up in front of 5 people and helping them. What was that like for you? How did you hone that skill? How did you step into your ability to captivate folks as a keynote speaker, as well as a trainer and a facilitator?
I still get a little jittery every now and then, but I will honestly say I'd never had a fear of speaking. And it's interesting because I think if we are honest, it may be the fear of people's reaction to what we're saying or how or a lack thereof, making sure what I'm saying is resonating with them. Am I funny? Am I interesting? Am I insightful? Am I informative? And so early on, I started to pick out people who I really like their style of speaking. Early on, it was Les Brown, right? And I loved one of his
Oh,
quotes. He
can't
always
get
says,
enough of Les. Go ahead. Go ahead. With your
exactly.
quote.
No, no, no. And he always used to say, you jump and grow your wings on the way down. And I just loved,
So
that
true.
that part of it. And then, I was looking at female speakers, and of course, Lisa Nichols is fantastic. Who doesn't love Lisa
Phenomenal. Oh, wait a
Nichols?
minute. So I used to play her in the car with my kids when I was carpooling them everywhere. And so what was it? Winners, quitters never win, and winners never quit.
she
That's
she She's amazing, and you just think of the people. For me, it was finding a model of who I really like and what I liked in their style.
yeah.
Even watched a lot of TED Talks, Andy, and I would start to, "Ooh, I like this, and I like how they did that, and I wonder what that's all about." And then I began to kind of form it in my own way to make it uniquely my own. Coming from corporate, and I don't know if you feel this way, it felt very stiff and conservative. And that
Yes.
was one thing I did not want to bring into my own business. I said, I own my own business. So as much as my clients get to choose me, I get to choose them. And if I can be free to be Tiana, which means Tiana could be corporate business, but she can also be sister girl Tiana, then that's who I want to be. And I want to show up for my clients in that space. And I've been able to do that on stage and even with clients. And I love that I have the freedom and the ability to do that.
Well, and part of your talent stack, okay, because is your confidence, because anybody else would be watching all these people and they'd say hashtag why bother. You know, speaking from my own experience, I would start looking at those TED Talks. Like Elizabeth, oh, I can't remember her last name, the Eat, Pray, Love gal.
Oh, yes.
Gilbert. Yeah, she does
Yes.
a TED Talk that is so tight in 8 minutes, that is so phenomenal. And it's great to learn from. And if you can be that wonderful observer like Tiana is, then you are going to get great ideas for your own speeches and how you want to move in the world. But I think the blockers some of us have is the hashtag why bother. They're so good. I could never be that good. And it takes practice, and it takes, getting up and doing it again and again, right?
And you may not be the best speaker, and I've learned this having pitched in front of a room of suppliers, like 50 suppliers with when I've had like 3 minutes to deliver a pitch, that you may not be the greatest speaker, but you can have someone on your team who is, and they can
Yes.
do that portion for you. I was in a competition once and we were all coming up one after the other. And I remember several of them were not the founders of the business, but they had hired someone or someone on their team who was really good at articulating. They were really good at the story and selling it. And the CEO and the founder was off on the side. That wasn't their gifting, but they knew enough and they were smart enough to say, I'm going to have someone who that is their gift to make us shine, because that may not be my strength. But if you do want to perfect in that area, it's a skill that you can learn.
Yeah.
Communication and speaking is a skill.
Right. And media prepared. And I talk about this a lot with the founders, Tiana, that you're stepping into this role as a founder, and your advice about delegating. We saw this all the time at the pitch event that I co-hosted every month, that it would be maybe the CMO, right? Somebody on the team would get up because they were a natural at it. That's brilliant. But founders, you need to have your sound bites. You need to have a list of your talking points just in case a mic gets shoved in your face. Or I like to use examples here when I've interviewed someone who has always brought the conversation back to the business and did the CTAs. I thought, oh, that's a way to manage up on a podcast. So thank you so much for that great advice, because founders, when you leave the employee mentality behind and you step into your founderhood headspace and mindset, you really have to own your authority, and you have to really work at that. And that's what I love about your work. And you were talking about the chokeholds. One of your books here is Undefeatable: Conquering Self-Defeat. And I was just mentioning a few self-defeating thoughts right there about speaking.
Yes.
How did you end up writing that book? And folks, links to Undefeatable will be in the show notes.
It was right at the time I was laid off. So I got laid off in 2011. I started writing the book within a year. I want to say it was published in early 2013, but like so the whole year of 2012 was when the book came along. I had partnered with a publisher, female publisher, and had done an anthology with about 20 other women, and I really liked that experience. And I said, "Hey, I think I want to write a book." So I reached back out to her,
Excellent.
but the whole book is around the experiences of being laid off, of losing that job and trying to figure it out, trying to figure out what my career looked like, what starting a business looked like, owning space in a room when you're a person of color, when you're a woman of color, getting that, as we talk about that literal seat at the table. And all of that was wrapped up to into Undefeatable. And at the time, you may not know this, I was an avid kickboxer. So I kickboxed for about 7 years. And so the original cover of the book had boxing gloves on it. And I kept thinking when I would go in there, because I was laid off, and I would go to my kickboxing class and I would greet my sensei and we would do the whole thing. It was a way of releasing,
Oh, yeah.
kind of this frustration, but it also made me feel like a victor and not a victim. And for me, defeat was that place where you wallow in self-pity, and I didn't want to be there. And so for me, it just the natural, I'm undefeatable. Like I may have these thoughts, or I may feel like I have failed, but
Yep.
failure does not equal defeat. And so that was where I wanted to get to a place. And I said, I think there's other people that might be struggling with these. And that's why it says conquering self-defeat, because we initiate it. It typically comes from us. You said earlier, it's that headspace
Right.
so
Well, I'm
that
feeling
was
the
the
Les
premise.
Brown quote coming up right there for that. How failure is when you don't get up after you've been knocked down. Otherwise it's all learning. It's all preparing you for what you need to do next. And unless you have these experiences, unless you're put up against these contrast moments that show you so much more about yourself, it reveals you, because you have to get past these blocks. And gosh, I love everything that you've been saying so much. Everybody, remember, you can find everything about Tiana. Visit TianaSanchez.com. Follow her everywhere at Like a Real Boss Lady. It's just, you can see, you can always get uplifted whenever Tiana opens her mouth or posts something. So, Tiana, when you launched your business, you were bootstrapping, you were having to learn how to leverage relationships and use all the resources that you could find, because you didn't come with the pedigree degree. You didn't come with the super duper network. You didn't come with all the connections and so many of the things, the education. And folks, I want to remind you, the Zeds don't think about this. It's all about what they built. Okay. But millennials, Gen X's, and boomers, we've all talked about how we need that education. It really isn't important, and this is where you shine so brilliantly, Tiana, and how you have built your business and your presence in the world in spite of what society would tell you. No, I don't think so. Talk a little
I
bit about how you overcame all that.
it took a while, and if I'm honest, because I used to hate this question, where'd you go to school? Like
Oh,
whenever I would start talking about business or work, or even being a few years in, having after starting my business, where'd you go to school? It was like the first question on people's lips, even in a circle like a networking event. And it stung, and I never fully knew how to answer that question early on. And then every time I did respond, then it felt like there was just like this something left the room. Like it was just like, oh, like I don't know that went over really well. And I started to feel bad about it. And so, again, if you're starting up and maybe you have the degree, and trust me, I believe in education, but you can get education in different ways. Education looks differently for everybody. So, am I educated? Yes. Do I have a degree? No. So, don't let that stop you. But
and
that
and
question was
can I
difficult.
just throw
Yes.
that into, there's
Yes.
plenty of people who have that 4-year degree that are not educated.
Drop the mic. Yes.
And
But
and
so yeah.
and also, I just want to throw out too that I have my MBA, but I don't have an undergraduate degree. And
Interesting.
folks,
Yeah.
just a little sidebar, because we're talking about mindset hacks. I went to an all women's MBA program, they understood women didn't always get through everything because they have, so many responsibilities in life. I never did get through a 4-year degree. But they told me not once, but twice, we don't take GMAT scores as low as yours. But
Wow.
I had to overcome that,
Yes.
headspace, mindset, but also be able to prove to them other ways that would show I had the critical thinking capability, just because I can't do standardized tests, that I have the critical thinking capability to do the curriculum, and it worked. But, that's where we can't get stop people from what society tells you must be in order for you to succeed. Right, Tiana?
Absolutely. What I didn't have, I combated that with what I did have. And at the time, again, my talent stack was strong. I had years of experience in other areas that I leveraged. And having worked at Hot Dog on a Stick, I had acquired stock in the company. So they had this beautiful program called an employee stock ownership plan. And each employee had a certain amount of money vested into the company. And when you hit 7 years, you were 100% vested. And so when I hit my year mark, year 7, I was 100% invested, and I had quite a lot of money saved. And so I remember when I left the company, which was about 7.5 years, I took that wonderful investment and, put it in an account and didn't really know what I was going to do with it yet. And then when 2011 hit, the layoff came, the business started 90 days later. That was the chunk of income that I had utilized. Not all of it, portion of it went to owning a home, but another portion of it went to starting the business. So I didn't have a network. I didn't decide to get a loan at the time. I didn't fundraise. I didn't crowdfund. I didn't seek seed money or any of that. It was, well, let me see what I can do. And it cost me, I would say, if I'm looking back, Andy, it probably was less than $1,000 for me to get my DBA, to get my license, right? To get the website up, get some business cards, right? That was what I thought meant I was really legitimate business. You got to have the business cards, right? With your name on it and the website. And it was probably maybe less than $1,000, but that's not the only investment. One lesson I learned is that to make money, you have to spend money and you have to invest in your business. So that was the early start.
Hold on. Stitch that on a pillow, everybody. We cannot hear that enough, Tiana. Thank you. To make money, you have to spend, or we like to say, and as you just said, invest money in your business. Talk a little bit about that.
So I invested in a couple of different things between now and, let's say, this is our year 12. So early on, I did get myself a coach. So I got myself a leadership coach or business coach, whatever you want to call it, and invested some money. It was significant for me at the time. It was probably maybe a couple of years in when I did that. And this person helped me to, strategize, really hone in on the services, because I'm a service-based business. Some businesses are product. You may be listening, you're a product-based business. I'm service, but it's still similar. I got to market test, are people going to want what I'm bringing to the table? So I invested in a coach who helped me. And then later on, I invested in, I'm going to call this person, I'll say it was like an audit. It was like a full business strategy audit where we looked at my processes, my practices. We looked at my flow, my funnels, my marketing. And it was a complete, robust process and a huge investment. I'm going to say huge. I'll just leave it to your imagination for me at the time. And then recently I hired a publicist to help me with increased visibility, which is also an investment to get me out in front of the masses, to increase that visibility, to, heighten awareness around what I am and who I am and what I do, so that people can, bring me into their company. They hire me to speak. Those are my service offerings. So you got to invest.
That's so key and so wonderful. And folks, PR, not social media, is how you get increased visibility. Social media, you can have all the vanity likes in the world. It's not going to drum up the business you think it's going to. It really is doing what you're doing, Tiana, the word of mouth, but also getting stories written up, being on podcasts, getting interviewed, showing up as a speaker, writing a book so that you can get it out into the world that way. People share it. Big brilliance right there. Let's talk about leveraging some other things that will help you bootstrap. Like, for example, I was telling everybody about the WeBank application that helps you leverage getting in the door as a minority owned business. What are some other ideas you have?
When I started to also, as I started to build my network, I would develop partnerships. So sometimes a partnership is a great opportunity for you to partner with someone else. You see that you both have, again, services or products that you do well in your own niche, and so you collaborate, you partner together, and you can, get that all done legally. I'm not going to tell you how to do that here, but you can definitely collaborate with someone else. I am a certified Weebie, so I'm glad that you are talking about that. So I have my WeBank certification, and it has gotten me indoors because organizations, a lot of corporations are strongly encouraged, emphasis on the strongly encouraged part, to hire diverse suppliers. So, and if you're certified, you almost kind of get to the top of the list, but it also makes them look good. You don't do it to make them look good, but it is what it is. And it actually puts you in a better position. So if you leverage that you are a woman owned business, that you're a veteran owned business, you're a minority owned business, and so forth, that can help get you higher up or in the door to the right people.
Right. And I was thinking about all the conferences that you speak at, being able to leverage that type of visibility.
Yes.
How do you get picked up as a keynote speaker or even on a panel?
So so I'm going to say this. Most of my business on speaking stage come from referrals, and that's a great method to have. It's not the only method, and it may not be the most sustainable, so I'll say that, but it is through referrals. And all of the speaking engagements, I will say 99% of them are paid. Now you might be saying, Tiana, what's that 1%? So a 1% that may not be paid is if I'm invited to speak, which I was recently last week at a huge conference, and it's my target audience, which means there's opportunity in the room. There's
Right.
multiple opportunity in the room, and you get me in the door in that space, then it's up to me to deliver an incredible presentation or talk that people are going to come up to me afterwards and want to connect. And so that 1% is if I'm in the room with people that are my target audience, then that's where that comes from. But usually it's referrals. People have heard me, people have seen me, people have been in the audience, and they say, "Hey, we'd love for you to come talk to one of our groups."
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's terrific. I mean, that you don't have to pay for in
Yes.
marketing, right? But
Yes.
getting paid to speak is key, everyone. Do that, use that filter, use Tiana's filter for whether you should show up, because your time and your energy, especially as a service provider, is so, yeah, you got to manage those resources. And so unless it's a win for you financially or a win because the people are in the room. And folks, you know how much I love talking about Innovation Women, Not Your Average Speakers Bureau. It's only $120 a year to be part of this platform. And one of the beauties is that the founder, Bobby Carlton, is ending manels. I mean, this is what she's on purpose about. So, especially in the tech industry, you're always seeing guys on the panels, and she's like, no. So, boost your visibility and get your voice heard. Join Innovation Women. I've got a link there where you get a little bit of a discount. It's Ande Inno Women. I have it in the show notes. Check it out. And because you never know who might be trying to find you, or just an opportunity. It's where event planners go to find women for a panel or speaking like you, Tiana. It's a phenomenal way to leverage. I love all these bootstrapping ideas. And I'd like to find out a little bit more about effed up, the upside of failure, because seriously, you win when you fail. Period. End of story, because it teaches you so much. How did you end up writing this book?
So this was like a part 2 to Undefeatable. So that was, again, you at the height of me being laid off and navigating all that stuff. And I wanted to write a book that honestly would help young adults. So when I had the concept, I remember sitting at a Mimi's Cafe, which is like a little cafe out here in California, with my son, who was about 17 at the time, in high school. And I was talking to them about this idea, and I'm like, I really want to do something. I want to write something for the youth, because at that time I was under the impression that a lot of the young people were just coming out of school and like, "Ooh, I should be earning six figures," or seeing the bling and saying, "Ooh, yes, this is what I want to get," but not really having put in the work. And I said, I really want to combat that, but in a fun way. And so I remember us sitting and talking about it. And then we kind of birthed this concept together. And so what was cool in the book one of the last chapters of the book was written by my son. So he was 17 years old. So he's a published author. And now he's almost 25 years old. But the whole book premise was for young adults. But what happened, Andy, when it was introduced, people were drawn to the topic so much of the upside of failure that I started getting requests from executives. I started getting requests from conferences of business people that were like, hey, we want to learn what this thing is about. How do we, what's the upside of failure? So I had to pivot. This is a good note for your founders. You pivot sometimes to meet the needs of the audience, and that means you have to evolve with the times sometimes, right? And so I had to pivot my service offering to address those, not young adults, but more adults working professional executives. And it was a success.
Oh, congratulations. And congratulations that your son wrote a chapter. I think that is phenomenal. Really collaborating with a precious treasure like that, I think is wonderful. Hooray. And you're right, being flexible. We can't just be so rigid in how we're delivering and meeting customers' needs. And if they come along and they have a need and you're feeling like, okay, I can provide that. What do I need to do to bring that? You're going to find even more about yourself and have a more delicious moment, right, Tiana?
Yes, and it was in my wheelhouse. So I wasn't
Yes.
stepping out into something foreign and completely, because trying to be everything to everybody
Ooh,
is, I'm not going to say it's impossible. It may not be realistic. It may not be the path to go down. So it was still within my lane. And the book itself was really just, it was saying that our failures are experiences. It's you, instead of using the possessive term I have failed, it's I am experiencing a failure. I have experienced. So it's really shifting. We talked a
right,
lot about mindset today. The way you look at these bad words, rejection,
right.
failure, adversity, and you flip it and you change it to something more positive. And so for me, I looked at it wins and losses. And a win is if you have the right effort, you have the right activities, and you have the right attitude, it will equal a win.
Beautiful. Absolutely. And you're so, thank you for bringing up that boundary, which is if it's in your wheelhouse, you cannot be everything to everyone. That is so important. Thank you for clarifying that. And now and I know because you've worked with so many types of people and walks of life, founders to corporate and C-suite, et cetera, raising capital. We know, everyone, and I'm just going to touch on this a little. We know that only less than 2% of traditional capital is going to female founders, people of color founders, minority founders. So this is why bootstrapping is so important. This is why looking at things like equity crowdfunding, lots of minority founders have had great success going to the platforms like Republic or WeFunder. What have you seen over the last 10 years in your community and with your clients, managing and navigating the bias, the implicit, clear as day bias that's there? And what thoughts do you have on that?
Well, it's a great question. Interestingly, I joined the board of a nonprofit organization about 3 years ago called the Black Cooperative Impact Fund. We recently changed our name, but they were addressing this very thing because access to capital for Black and brown startups and small business owners was very difficult, and even more so for women. Like the questions that they ask women as compared to men
Oh,
were even different. Right?
yeah.
So we said, well, how do we solve the problem? And they created this nonprofit BCIF, which evolved pooling funds from the community to fund these small businesses. And so we started entering the space of micro lending. So if you know micro loans, these are small, between 5 and 20,000. We just extended it to $50,000. But micro loans with very low interest rates to help these startups. So maybe it was for inventory, maybe it's for facility space, maybe it's for your employees or for payroll. But we come alongside these small businesses where they may have gotten turned down, or they may have a difficult time at the standard financial institutions. They can come get a micro loan through us. And so I am excited because this has been game changing over the last 3 years. We've seen small businesses, Andy, fund. We had a water company get funded. We had a makeup company get funded. We had a bicycle company get. I mean, so all of these wonderful companies have been able to participate in receiving funds, microloans through this nonprofit.
Oh my gosh, microloans are the gift that keep on giving because they feed the region. They feed your community. They bring economic improvement and success. It changes the generational wealth trajectory of families and communities. It's like the best thing that you can do. I'm so happy that you're on the board of this wonderful organization.
Thank you. And we have more to come this year. We've had some great partnerships to help continue funding. And so we're expanding out even outside of Los Angeles, which is in California, but
Yeah.
Los Angeles adjacent to some of the cities.
Oh, this is wonderful
Yes.
news. Thank you. Thank you. And I just love that opportunity for folks because it's not all about the $5 million raise so you can be a global and become a unicorn or a zebra. It's the impact on someone who's very happy with maybe getting to 1 million a year in revenue, right? Where they're hiring people and employing people in the community and in the region. And it's a real lift. I just love that something fierce. So what does success look like for you, Tiana, as you're looking at where you are today? Because I know it's evolved over the years as you continue to build your business and your presence and how you serve the world. But going forward, what does success look like for you? And talk a little bit about the measuring stick you use, because so often folks use a stick that's not theirs, right? For success. What's yours?
Success for me is incremental. It comes in steps and comes in stages. It's not a final destination. I've always said that to myself. I do feel like it's a desired outcome achieved. It's simply stated, a desired outcome achieved. If I desire to wake up the next day, ooh, that's success for me. I get up out of bed, ooh, that's success for me. I make it out to do my 3 miles, which I haven't done yet, but I'm going to. So it's a desired outcome achieved. And at the end of the day, if I can lay my head on a pillow and I feel like I've made an impact in someone's life. And it's in what I call like an emotional awakening, what we might say is an aha moment. But someone has said, wow, I really appreciated that. Tiana, you helped me look at this in a different way, or I provided a tool or a resource. That to me is success. And then I can go to sleep. I can Before I go to sleep, I spend time with my family. Each of them have time with mommy. It's not like I'm absent, but I'm present for them. I'm present for my husband. I go to bed at 8:30. I eat well, plant-based diet, like I'm taking care of my body. Those are all me saying and measuring this is success for me.
Excellent. I love that. And you've been an entrepreneur now since 2011. So, how have you seen entrepreneurship serve you both personally and professionally?
Freedom, freedom, freedom. And I say that, let me say freedom with the choices that I made. I'm not bound by a W-2 jobs, let's say. Nothing against W-2 because I've been there. I've lived the 9 to 5s. But it's definitely the ability to make my own schedule, to be flexible. If I wake up one day and say, you know what, I need a mental health day. I can do that without my boss giving me a side eye thinking, are you really, you really need a mental health day? I don't have that. I can create boundaries. I love that I said, earlier that as much as my clients are interviewing me or hiring me, I'm hiring them. And so I can say no to someone. I could choose not to work with someone. Whereas when you're bound outside of entrepreneurship, you feel like you may be stuck in that place where you don't have a lot of choices. So entrepreneurship has given me choices I could have never imagined, options, unbelievable options.
Oh my gosh, that's right there. The choices, everybody. I know that resonates with you, even though it can be so hard and so scary sometimes, right? You have the choice. And so, so many founders I hear Tiana talk about how you have the same thing, not being able to, when they're working for someone, not being able to fix things, fix procedures, fix systems the way they would like to have them done. And so when you are your own boss or when you're building a business, you get to have a lot of influence in how things happen
That's
and
right.
those outcomes, which are so important. All right, just share any final call to action before I put you into the green room and we wrap up this wonderful conversation.
Give yourself permission to make mistakes. Give yourself permission to experience failures, and just know that every failed experience can lead you to a new or better outcome. And this is not my quote, but I think it's so pertinent to say that failure is only failure if you fail to learn from it. So don't run away from it, don't shy from it, but what are you learning from this experience that's going to take you to reach newer heights?
Oh, thank you. This has been such an inspirational conversation, an important one for everyone. I know we're all going to learn so much continuing. I mean, the ripple effect will be for years to come. And I'm sure that's what happens whenever you get in front of a room, Tiana, and you share your wisdom, or whenever you work with someone, the ripple effect, it has to feel wonderful.
I appreciate it. I'm honored and blessed to be given a position. I look at what I do, me being a vehicle to get the message out. And I think that's another thing I think is the humility, keeping yourself humble is another part because you can always look like, "Oh, I did this. I did this." And no one gets anywhere in life by themselves.
That's right. You don't succeed alone. No one is a self-made woman or man or person. There are people who add wind to your sails. So thank you, Tiana, for joining us for this great conversation. And pop you in the green room and wrap it up. Don't go anywhere so we can do that IG reel. Woohoo! All right, everyone. That was so amazing. I know that you got some nuggets that are going to help you keep moving forward on your founder journey. Be sure to reach out and follow Tiana everywhere she glows. Grab some of these wonderful books that she's produced out there to help you with your journey, and tune into her podcast, Like a Real Boss, and visit her website, tianasanchez.com. Everything will be in the show notes. All right. So until the next time we get to chat, please promise me that you'll remember you're braver than you believe, stronger than you think. And as we say here in Boston, you are wicked smart. You've got this. Okay. Until next time, I'm wishing you a delicious day everywhere you glow. Mwahs from Boston. Cheers.